In 2002, there was a public revelation that Iran had begun to construct some nuclear facilities that it had not yet declared to the IAEA. And in the course of the intervening couple of years, it transpired that a long pattern of at least a decade and a half standing of failing to report activities and transactions and developments in their nuclear program that under their safeguards agreement they were obliged to report. They failed to do so. And so this represented a series of unambiguous safeguards violations. In late 2003, Iran adopted a policy of more and fuller cooperation with the IAEA and largely admitted many of these transgressions that fell overwhelmingly into the area of reportage. That is to say, it wasn't what Iran was doing that was the problem, because it was building an enrichment plant or building a uranium conversion facility. These are permitted activities under the NPT, but you're obliged to report them, and they had not done so.
In 2003, when these installations in Natanz enrichment program and clandestine programs which Iran had been running 20 years became public, the IAEA started to look and verify the Iran's declaration. In the beginning we didn't use the word non-compliance, but said more that Iran was not meeting its reporting obligations, and the reason for that was the agreement between EU3 and Iran that non-compliance would have deferred this directly to UN Security Council. And then the verification scheme was started, and it runs still today.
The IAEA then was faced with the challenge of reconstructing Iran's nuclear history to the point where it was satisfied that it could account for all previously unreported activities, and thereby come to the conclusion that there were no undeclared nuclear activities in Iran that might be weapons related. And by 2005, the IAEA judged that Iran's cooperation had not been sufficient to allow adequate reconstruction of that history. Therefore, unanswered questions lingered. The IAEA judged itself to be unable to declare Iran restored to good standing in the regime. And in the face of what appeared to be protracted Iranian failure to cooperate to the extent that the IAEA thought was necessary, they referred the case to the UN Security Council.
The IAEA announced non-compliance about Iran in 2005, just immediately after Iran restarted the enrichment activities. Therefore, non-compliance was just a tool to prevent Iran, to deprive Iran from its legitimate rights for enrichment. And in November 2004, when Iran decided to suspend the enrichment in the framework of Paris Agreement, which was more broader suspension, immediately a week later, the IAEA removed Iran's file from the agenda of Board of Governors, normalized the file. You see, when Iran decided to suspend, everything was fine, no non-compliance, no problem. Iran removed from the agenda. The day Iran started the enrichment, immediately it was decided non-compliance. Immediately they referred to the United Nations Security Council. This is completely political issue.
If you look at the charter of the IAEA and focus on its mandate, it has very limited role in enforcement. It essentially has no enforcement capacity or legal mandate to enforce. When it suspects or finds an instance of non-compliance, its option is to refer the case to the UN Security Council, which then becomes the enforcing body. That, of course, then puts the compliance issue into the realm of international politics.
I mean, they considered Iran as a threat, the Iranian nuclear program as a threat to international peace and security, while Iran has no nuclear bomb. And IAEA for 9 years is reiterating that there is no evidence on even diversion toward nuclear bomb. And this is the implication of the IAEA referral to United Nations Security Council.
The IAEA conducts regular inspections of declared Iranian nuclear facilities. It has more regular contact and interaction with Iran than anybody else. I think it has found some mix of cooperation and considerable frustration in its engagement with Iran.
In 2004-2005, two countries like Egypt and South Korea, the IAEA found them like Iran, non-compliance, the same. But the case was immediately managed, finished, quiet in the IAEA because Egypt and South Korea, they had good relation with the US. And they referred Iranian case to United Nations Security Council in Chapter 7, implementing sanctions, pressures, considering as a threat to international peace and security because of the hostilities between Iran and the US.
The agency has very limited possibilities here. It's mainly the actions of the international community, UN Security Council, which can put pressure on Iran with various means, negotiations, sanctions, embargoes, etc., to bring them to the negotiating table and solve the issues.
In general, I think the feeling is that both the Iran case and the North Korea case call into question the efficacy or adequacy of the world's ability to respond effectively to compliance crises. You might say that the Iran case is still open in the sense that the latest wave of sanctions seems to be more biting and the pain inflicted on Iran seems to be greater, and Iran's reactions might be more forthcoming as a result, but we still haven't seen the results of that latest wave of efforts to bring them to heel.
I don't think the IAEA is a judge on questions of culpability. The international community should do that. My own view is that it is time to clear that record, and perhaps to do it under the basis of a kind of process that was followed in South Africa under the truth commissions there. That is a no-fault finding, but an effort to try to get at the full truth, that being more valuable in the other questions. The other kinds of issues that the IAEA should involve themselves in the Iranian program is to ensure that it is doing everything that can adequately and usefully be done for the future, so that as the Iranian program progresses in its own directions, the IAEA continues to satisfy itself that it's applying the best technologies, the best techniques, and the best set of arrangements.
If there's going to be a negotiated resolution of this crisis, it has to be a deal between Iran and some outside parties that probably must include Washington, probably must include the so-called P5+1. And the IAEA may well figure in the implementation of any deal, because part of what the outside world will be looking for from Iran is additional transparency, a larger and more intrusive role for the IAEA in confirming the peaceful nature of Iran's nuclear program. But it will be an implementer more than an actor in